Hello and welcome back to the channel. Another interesting one here today. One that we really should not be surprised by. But after 40 years, Optimus Prime is dead again, presumably, right? Following Transformers issue number 30 by Robert Kirkman and Dan Mora. I suppose once Kirkman was attached, we should have seen this coming. But Optimus Prime, as you know him, no longer exists. And in true fashion, his protege or his replacement is Elita 1 or now Elita Prime. That's right. Optimus has now been replaced by a woman. It's interesting. I'm going to go through this article that Screen Rant put out. Right. I tried to review the opinions shared by the other side because I think it's important to look and see how utterly delusional these takes tend to be because they've painted this largely as an an exciting opportunity, right? It's interesting that whenever there's a prominent male figure that gets replaced by a woman, it's always followed by the words, exciting and empowering. But you never see the reverse, right? You never see the reverse happen. This is very fascinating to watch. So I'm going to go through the article here from Screen Rant, and we'll just discuss a bit what exactly is happening with Optimus Prime and this character of Elita One. Right? Okay. 40 years later, Transformers kills Optimus Prime all over again. All right. So from the top, a few heroes are as iconic as Transformers Optimus Prime. For decades, the leader of the Autobots has represented the epitome of inspiring leadership. Yes, he has. Truly epic robotic war fighting for universal freedom. However, a brand new story reveals Optimus Prime is no more. Skip a bit. In the latest issue of the Energon Universe Transformer series from Skybound and Image Comics, tensions between Autobots reach a breaking point with the arrival of Elita One on Earth, having come from the ongoing war on Cybertron. Despite their history and close relationship, Elita cannot fathom why Optimus has chosen to remain on Earth when their own homeworld needs defending. From his view, the Autobots cannot allow humanity to suffer at the expense of their war that has been brought to Earth. All right, so for those of you who may not be too familiar, I don't claim to be an expert at on Transformers, but I have grown up reading the comics and watching the animated series. Largely, I think those launched almost simultaneously. So if you've only read the comics or watched the series, you've not really missed out on much. Um, but Alita is not effectively a new character, right? She has been around for a while, but she was never really prominent. She was a love interest for Optimus, that made her debut, I believe, in 85, 84, 85, I believe it's 85, as Optimus's, his love interest, right? Nothing surprising there. Um, and over the course of the several years, she didn't get a whole lot of screen time, and why would she, right? She's not the prominent character in this story. But whenever we do revisit Cybertron, usually she's a part of this all-female Transformers group that is helping the Resistance, right? Um, so they go on to say with Megatron and the Decepticons actively threatening the planet, Optimus Prime is determined to defeat the Autobots' long-term foes here before even thinking about returning to Cybertron. The result is a brief clash between Autobots with an angered leader claiming Optimus Prime no longer deserves the matrix of leadership. Hmm. How so empowering, right? Such female empowerment, she gets to determine who's deserving of the matrix of leadership. Fascinating. Ultimately, Optimus Prime makes a surprising decision to relinquish the matrix of leadership voluntarily, confirming that the matrix chooses who the Transformers leader should be, not the other way around. Rather than returning to Optimus, the Matrix remarkably chooses Elita One herself, transforming her as the all-new Elita Prime. Okay, that's worded a bit odd because it says he voluntarily relinquished it, but then it says that the Matrix chose her. So that's a bit muddy. Um, but let's carry on. It's an exciting shift in the Transformers mythos and the dawn of a new era. As I said, whenever this does happen, they tend to use all the flowery words to sort of mask the true intention behind a lot of these changes. That said, what's even more surprising is what happens to Optimus Prime in the aftermath of this major Matrix twist. While the rise of Elita Prime is a huge development, it also means something equally shocking. Optimus Prime no longer exists. By giving up the matrix of leadership, Optimus has lost the title of Prime and has also been transformed physically without its power. No longer one of the tallest Autobots, so which means that he reverts back to, I believe, Orion is his original form. Optimus is more diminished. He's also lost his classic face shield, which is definitely a look that'll be hard to get used to. It's a pretty crazy change, especially considering that Optimus Prime had only just been restored a few issues prior. No, I'm gonna pause here a moment to just absorb the information that we've just been given, right? We've had decades of this character who's been a long-standing figure of masculinity, regardless of whether he's a machine or not, or human. The characteristics that he does espouse and elevate are all the same masculine traits that we've come to love in all the heroic journeys that we've consumed throughout our lives, right? And they've chosen to take this character and literally strip away the things that made him what he is. Um, and I'm sure that further down they're gonna try to suggest that this was some sort of development, right? Where he needs to learn something before he reclaims the matrix of leadership. Because we've seen this happen a multitude of times in entertainment in recent years, and of course this is going to highlight Alita as the reason for that change or that realization that he comes to. And this is something that's not talked about often enough in media, so I'll mention it here, right? When it comes to male characters in entertainment, whatever the story or whatever the media may be, all the IPs throughout history, the notable IPs were all created by men, whether it's video game, literature, film and TV, all created by men. And what's not talked about often enough is why that is the case, right? When a man or a male writer creates a male character on screen or on the page, it is with the intention of presenting the next generation with, the characteristics that need to be elevated. These are the virtues that you must embody to be a man, be a leader, be a good husband and a father, right? So when a male writer creates a male character, it is with that specific intention. It is to guide the next generation into what it means for them to become a man. But equally as important to that is when a male writer writes a woman, right? All the notable female characters that exist throughout entertainment have all been written by men. And that is something that isn't spoken about often enough. And the reason for it. Now, when a male writer creates a female character, it is similarly with the intention of elevating the characteristics that are feminine, that the younger generation of women can look to and aspire to be a good wife and a good mother in the same way that they would create a male character for the younger men um to aspire to be, right? Men are the progenitors of the species, and so their responsibility doesn't lie simply with providing guidance to the younger men. It's also for them to provide guidance to the younger women as well, and highlight what requirements, what characteristics they need to have to be a good wife. Be feminine, be soft, be agreeable, and be a good mother. Now, on the flip side, when we allow a female writer to create these characters. We've seen, several, we've seen a lot of evidence of that, within the past few decades as more women come into the writer's room, right? When a female writer attempts to create a female character, without the male guidance there, that female character ends up having male characteristics, right? You've seen it with Captain Marvel, the Barbie doll, the recent bride, these characters, these girl boss, and the girl boss, the label has become popular for a reason, right? It's something that we've seen happen over and over again because this is the trend and this is the pattern that we are recognizing. When a female writer tries to write a female character without male guidance, her version of that woman is not feminine more often than not, um, because in her mind, a character now needs to be strong, and her only source for what strength is to look to a male, and so they end up creating these female characters that have these very masculine features. They're loud, they're aggressive, and they're gross, in a way that males tend to be, right? So without the male guidance, these female writers really don't have, a reference point for what it means to be feminine. Then when they try to write a male character, the problem they've already used the male characteristics on the female characters, so they can't give them to the male as well, which means that the men that they do create or write, those men end up being very feminine and weak. And so that is something that is a dynamic that I don't think is discussed often enough, because to write truly compelling and interesting, male and female characters, men are a critical component of that, because men are the progenitors of the race, and they are equipped with the knowledge for what is required to carry the species on, which does as uncomfortable as it may be to accept, it does mean men need to have male characteristics and women need to have very feminine characteristics. And men are the one who provide that guidance. And so if you look at the introduction of Elita 1, when she first appeared, in 85, I'll try to find a side by side, if I can, of that, or her first appearance and design, and the current iteration of Elita 1, and you'll see the huge contrast, right? Even though the Transformers are not human, um, in their design, there's a clear distinction there, right? The male Transformers tend to be very rugged, in their frame. They transform into tanks, aircrafts. Optimus transforms into a semi truck. And for the women that the designs, they have more softer features, right? And they often transformed into motorcycles, small luxury vehicles, and so on. So even though the Transformers themselves are not human, they still have these distinct features and characteristics that align with feminine or masculine traits. So yeah, it's something that isn't spoken about, but it's something that we desperately need to return to, if it is that we intend to have a return to, characters that we can relate to, because that is the problem when you have female writers trying to create these characters. A man cannot relate to the male character that she presents, and a woman cannot relate to the female character she presents, because women do not want to see a masculine woman, and men do not want to see a feminine man. And the stories all fall apart. And that is why, one of the purposes of this channel is to try to highlight that, the importance of that male perspective, because again, the males are the progenitors of the species, so they know what is required for, a husband, a father, and they know what is required for a wife and a mother. Anyway, we'll carry on. It's almost like the reverse of Gandalf's transformation from Gandalf the Grey into Gandalf the White in The Lord of the Rings. Not quite. Very different. Instead of evolving into something greater, Optimus Prime has essentially been stripped of the identity. Oh, see, so it's not the same. How is that the same thing? Uh, Yeah. However, he is no less determined to fulfill his mission on Earth. That being said, that's going to be a lot harder to do now. A lot harder to do now that Elita Prime is splitting the Autobots with orders to return to Cybertron. Likewise, those who choose to stay with Optimus Prime on Earth out of loyalty are no longer considered Autobots. So we're not just stripping Optimus of his title. It's all the Autobots that we've come to love and know, and even those that would choose to side with Elita. Um, I'm not sure why they would, but it just feels like character assassination, that these characters that have been with Optimus for decades and fighting alongside him, but now at least some of them, I assume, will be turning their backs on him in favor of Elita. And what does that say about their character that's now being called into question? At any rate, it should be fascinating to see how Optimus chooses to lead without the title of Prime behind him, although Optimus Prime has effectively died once more. 40 years after his most iconic death, it's going to be very exciting to see Optimus alone is still capable of in future issues of Kirkman's Transformers. All right, so there we have it. The end of an era, right? I'm not sure how much lower you can get with these changes that are constantly being made to these beloved legacy characters. It's really just very sad to see. It truly is. And one of the things that I'd hoped that they would have sort of touched on was the matrix of leadership here, but they didn't, because I'm assuming they'll need to make some changes to how the matrix has worked in the past versus now. But while it wasn't explicitly said in the comics or in the cartoons, right? The matrix of leadership, you know, for all intents and purposes, it chooses a character who represents the all the masculine traits that you know that we're familiar with within the heroic journey, because all these stories, that is their origin. It's just a reshaping of the hero's journey, right? And typically you will have that heroic character that has those characteristics, bravery, and so on, that others recognize in him and choose to follow. And these are uniquely male characteristics. These are male characteristics. And again, I'm sure I'll get a lot of pushback from that, saying, women can be leaders too. They cannot. And I say often on this channel that, one of the reasons we need to have these uncomfortable conversations is because there are some uncomfortable truths that we have been ignoring for far too long, and we're literally witnessing before our eyes the destruction of everything we hold dear, when we attempt to subvert nature, and our inherent biology. These characteristics are inherently masculine. Leadership is an inherently masculine trait. And I've said it before on the channel that one of the reasons for this is that men are equipped to tread into your effectively your biological makeup doesn't just end in just the physical realm, right? How you tackle certain issues, your decision making skills, all those things are shaped by your biology. Men are more inclined to take risk, and oftentimes leadership means taking risk. Women are risk averse. Again, there have been numerous studies done on this, in terms of how the male brain works and the female brain works. Women are risk averse. It's one of the reasons that when it comes to promotions and jobs, and career decisions, that women don't excel as well as men, because um, women don't often press for, higher wages or promotions, but men typically do, because men will take the risk that if I do push for this, I could potentially lose my job or have to move elsewhere. Men are more likely to change jobs. So that inherent female idea, of risk aversion, that in itself immediately disqualifies you from being a good leader. A good leader has to be um, willing to take risk, and it's not just a matter of the risk itself. It's the respect of those that would follow a leader. We've seen recently, with the slew of girl empowerment, and female empowerment, and these characters that are popping up in TV shows and film, and comics. But when it comes down to it, if you go back through history, this is an extreme example, but it does illustrate the point. When it comes to something like crime, within underground crime, where we don't have the luxury of pretending that gender doesn't matter. There's no instance in history where you will have a gang leader who will be followed wholesale by other members of a ruthless criminal gang. It just won't happen, because and that is a leadership role. However we want to, um, morally speaking, however we want to interpret that, but it is, you do have leaders within the criminal underground. And you will never find these criminals following a woman, because there are certain characteristics, particularly, yeah, either being feared or respected. But whether it's one or the other, this is something that is uniquely a male characteristic. And at the end of the day, the currency that exists between men. If you walk into a room full of men, it's something that you can quickly recognize. Um, whether the men take everyone in that room seriously. It's an unspoken thing. It's not something that the men get together in a room and decide on, but we immediately recognize the most valuable person in that group, and the least valuable person in the group as well. And you will see, just by virtue of how we communicate with each other, the level of respect that exists there, because respect is the currency that exists between men. It is. That is one of the most important things. It doesn't matter whether you're in a boardroom or on the streets. Respect is that currency that exists between men, and that is something that largely exists through competence, how valuable you are, but also strength. So we have this new character of Elita, the typical boss girl, and one of the the recent Transformers One animated film. One of the comments that this character recently made, in that movie, sort of encapsulates her new personality. And I say new personality because, again, when she was first introduced, she was definitely not like this. But this is the character that we were dealing with now. This is her quote, right? Word for word from the actual film. It's I'm better than you in every way, except you have hope. You always have. You went back into the mine to rescue Jazz. You snuck up to the surface to find the matrix of leadership. And this was intended to be words of encouragement in the film, or at least that's how it was phrased everywhere, right? This was her word of encouragement to Optimus. I'm better than you in every way, except you have hope. So declaring that she is better than Optimus. Yeah. So here we are. As I've said at the very beginning, I'm sure this will be, um, you know, it'll be reframed as some sort of arc for Optimus, where he needs to overcome certain things in order to reclaim the Matrix of Leadership. But there was no need for the Matrix of Leadership to be taken from him to accomplish that, and there certainly was no need for it to be handed to Elita Prime. There's clearly an agenda here. There's clearly a reason this was, I'm sure, was chosen for this, right? And of course, with their reunion, it's these characters often cannot have a female love interest who is feminine in any way. I recently had a similar discussion with, I think it was a Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, where they introduced a female character for Dunk, supposedly his love interest. And it was the very same idea where she was vaguely mentioned in the books, wasn't given a lot of a lot of time or words, dialogue, really. And so someone in the writer's room decided, okay, this we need a woman somewhere. Um, but we can't just make her a supportive, feminine love interest for Dunk. You have to make her someone who's a bit aggressive or competitive with him and better than him in some way or another because of the idea that we can't have a damsel, we can't have a feminine love interest if a woman must be there. And as I've mentioned before, we've seen it with characters like Mario, the recent Mario film, where Princess Peach couldn't be saved by Mario. The character of Mario exists solely for that purpose. That is how that is how he has been defined for decades. Him saving the princess. They could not allow him to save Princess Peach in his own movie. I guarantee you, we'll see the same thing happen in the upcoming Zelda film, right? And these are things that I think the men watching, you need to take note of, because if you do value these stories as an art form, whether it's video games, comics, TV shows, you have to note what is happening and reject it wholesale, reject it completely. Now, if it means that these industries have to fall, unfortunately, that is something that we have to allow to happen, and then create something new from the ashes. Because you've seen what has been happening, and there's no saving this. If we look to the east to what is happening with in Japan, and manga sales have effectively outclassed comics at this point, and one of the reasons for that is they understand the importance of male stories, uniquely male stories, and they have shown in specifically for that. And admittedly, manga and anime has slowly shifted to Western sensibilities over the last decade or two as well. So there's some danger of that being infected by the same ideology. But at the moment, unfortunately, it's the best alternative that we can look to and say this is what we should aspire to be. And I wouldn't embrace it completely because we need some amount of gatekeeping needs to happen on the manga side as well to ensure that we don't have characters like Elita One popping up. I mean, we've seen it happen with Gundam, which is sort of the other side to Transformers in the East. After a while, they also did the same thing and they introduced a female Gundam character. And I've seen this argument made so many times, like, um, we need a female Gundam protagonist. Like, why do we need that? We don't need that. If that's not what the franchise was built on, why is it necessary? And again, the question is never asked in reverse. No one is going to, the romance novels at Barnes and Noble, and decrying the fact that the protagonists are largely women. No one is saying, we need a male perspective, and we need to insert and inject masculine attributes into those stories. No one is doing that. So Japan is largely, sort of already being infected by that, and it hasn't helped, right? At least in terms of increasing the sales for Gundam, it certainly hasn't helped them. I believe recently, the good news is recently we've had comments from some of the veterans in the manga industry who have recently come out to, I believe it was the Evangelion creator who recently came out to say, and I believe Code Geass, one of the Code Geass creators also came out to say that, the manga has started to lose its way, and they're either no longer telling original stories, or they're attempting to tell stories to cater to the Western audience versus telling uniquely Japanese stories, which is what made manga and anime popular in the first place. No one wants you to make stories from the American or Western perspective. The reason it became popular is because it was uniquely Japanese. So, Alita 1. I'll leave it there. My advice is, as it always has been, we need to reject these stories that attempt to, you know, deconstruct or circumvent the male voice or the male perspective. These characters and these IPs are uniquely male, and they need to remain uniquely male because the male experience is critical. The male voice is critical. As I said during this video, men are the progenitors of the race, and it is their perspective that highlights the virtues and morals that are necessary for a healthy and a thriving society. That is very, very important. And it's even more important for these stories because, again, the motto of the channel, stories influence the culture, and the culture is a reflection of our stories. So uh, we have our work cut out for us. Let's just put it that way. With all these changes and the damage being done to a lot of these IP and a lot of these characters, we have a lot that we will, there's a lot that we'll need to do to recover from this, right? But in the meantime, reject this. Do not purchase this. Do not read this. Allow it to die. It doesn't matter if they come out to say that there's some meaning or arc that Optimus needs to go through. Do not give them the benefit of making an excuse by saying this is okay. It's not a big deal. It is a big deal. It is very much a very big deal. Don't fall for it. Reject it and allow it to die. And as usual, I always encourage you guys to pick up a pen, pick up a pencil, a piece of paper, start writing. We need your voice. Your voice is important. That's important for our stories. That's important for our culture. So get to work. All right. I'll see you guys next time.